Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a podcast vodcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty Gensius, a Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who has collected a great group of friends to talk about Apple and how it applies to the seasoned citizens. Let's see who's with us tonight.
Hello, I'm Chris Wesselman. I'm 77. I've been around the Mac since 1984. I basically came up through what I call the user group channel. That's where I learned all my computer stuff, and in Dallas, Texas for almost 9 years. And then I got to work for Apple in Austin and Campbell and Cupertino. And I've been retired here in Tucson for the past 8 years, and I've been a happy member of the Tucson Mac user group. And that's another story, but I currently am using the M1 Mac Mini, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and a 9th generation iPad. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm 72 years old from Bay Village, Ohio, and I'm a member of the Northeast Ohio Apple Club. Once upon a time, I was a foundryman, and after that, a high school math and stats teacher. My joyride with all things Apple began in 2006, and today I use an extra large assortment of Apple devices and services in very many ways, and I really, really enjoy it.
I'm Gary Shirk. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and along with Marty and Peter, belong to the Northeast Ohio Apple Group. I'm 87, and I started with Macs in the year 2004 with 2 Mac user groups in Cleveland. I primarily use my iPhone 16 Pro Max and my M4 Mac Mini.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've ever talked about what I use. I started back in 2004, 2005, and got introduced because I wanted to do a enhanced podcast is what they did with Macs. So I got loaned a MacBook or I guess it was a G book then, Chris?
The clamshell was the book.
It wasn't a clamshell. It was aluminum frame.
Oh, a PowerBook, baby.
PowerBook, yeah. And so that was loaned to me to make a podcast, and I just really started liking the platform. Currently, I'm using an M4 Mac Mini to run this show, do the recording, do all the editing. I also have a Studio Ultra, but I've kind of shut that off to see what I can do with this Mac Mini and am greatly enjoying it. Own all things Mac. That's one way of putting it. Primarily the other piece of equipment I work a lot with is the Vision Pro, and have a podcast on that too. So this show, we're going to talk about weather apps. Every week, somebody tosses out an idea and it's like, yeah, let's do weather apps. Of course, we're experiencing this absolutely crazy cold blast. I saw pictures of people with snow in Florida. Am I right with that? That it got cold enough for...
Yep.
And, Peter and Gary and I are all up in the Cleveland area. Chris is out in Arizona. So what's it like out there?
Well, we're west of the snow here. But there has been snow in eastern New Mexico and, parts of Texas. And, of course, New Orleans is the one that got a lot of headlines.
Yeah.
Pretty rare that they get snow.
Yeah, I have a niece and her husband and a new baby in New Orleans, and they sent us pictures. And we couldn't quite figure out if the pictures were shot in Illinois on their visit or if they were shot in New Orleans. But now I'm saying it's got to be New Orleans.
I saw a picture of a snow crawfish that someone had built, and it was pretty impressive.
That's pretty cool. So weather app seems appropriate for today. And so we're going to just share some of our favorite weather apps. And a lot of us have some of the same ones that we use amongst ourselves or have used. And then there are some of us who have some divergent ones and ways in which we use them. So let's go ahead and maybe start with Chris in terms of what kind of weather apps do you use or have you used?
Well, I've always been a bit of a weather nut myself. Back in the day, the default channel on our cable TV was always the Weather Channel, and because there was always something good on there. And my younger son took a bunch of meteorology classes in college before he ended up going into film animation. But he's still very interested in weather. We trade a lot of fun texts back and forth. And on the Mac and the iPhone, it's evolved over the years. But as we stand today here in 2025, Apple Weather is probably, the default app that everybody's going to be taking a look at least. And it's come a long way. It's absorbed a number of third-party apps, as we know, for better, worse, or whatever. But it's, probably the number one I use. AccWeather is another one that I like because we live a little bit west of Tucson and slightly elevated in the Tucson mountains. So our weather can be just a hair different. And so it's nice to have a weather station nearby. And I actually have two to draw from. And then the third one is a new one called National Weather Forecast Data. And my wife and I were already familiar with the scientific forecasts that are put out in Colorado. Well, these are the same folks, and now they've got a friendly app that wraps around the scientific forecast, and it has lots of forward forecast data and different models and stuff. So that's something that people can take a look at. And then Weather Underground is my last one of the main ones. And the two I pay for are the National Weather Forecast Data and Weather Underground. And that was probably one of the better ones, in my opinion, up until a few years ago. But it's always sort of a bit of a moving target. So maybe that's good for now. Peter, what do you think?
Well, when I first heard our topic, I was going to say, well, I just use Apple Weather, but then I sort of examined my true usage, and I do use 4 weather apps, but 80% of what I use is Apple Weather, and I use it on all the platforms: Watch, iPad, iPhone, and Mac, but primarily on my Watch and iPhone. Occasionally, I'll want better maps, faster maps where I can control the layers, and that's when I go to Weather Underground. I have a soft spot in my heart because that was developed by students at the University of Michigan, where I was a student, and I like that. I also like that it's got a feature where you can pull in people's weather stations from their house, so I can look at people's weather stations, a mile east of me, 3 blocks west of me, and so forth. And there's 2 other things I use quite a bit. Fantastical, which is my calendaring system, has built into the calendar just a snapshot of the weather on every one of the next 10 days. And if you click it, it gives more detail. And I occasionally click it when I'm looking at things on my calendar, but it's an infrequent use. And on my desktop, if I just want to check something quickly, iStat's menu, which puts lots of stuff in your menu bar, will put weather in your menu as well. And I particularly like that because it's really pretty the way they have organized it. And I like looking at that. It gives me, it gives me moonrise and moonset, which is one thing I don't know if any of the other ones give me. It has a lot of information in it, but it's a quick look at the weather. So those are the apps I use.
Gary, any comments in terms of weather?
Well, I'm not as complicated, but I just learned something from Chris with the National Weather Forecast data that I'll check out after the show. I, too, like Peter, used Weather Underground, and now I'll kind of go back to it. But when Apple Weather kind of took over on my phone, which is really the first thing I look at in the morning, I just glance at it. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time. So I have, here, Cleveland, and then I have where my Nashville, Seattle, and a few other cities, which I like about it. I like the idea that it will give you up to 10 days fairly accurate forecasts. And it also, which is what I really liked about Weather Underground, which is still there, Peter, is the radar. I like the idea of looking. I'm on the east side of Cleveland, and really I can see the weather moving from the west side of Cleveland to the east side of Cleveland. I like the idea that my house has got a marker on the map. I do think, as we've all said, AccWeather has come a long way. I understand that IBM has something to do with that weather that comes from Apple. So that's my primary weather app.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce a couple that are on the list. I mean, AccWeather, I primarily use it on my phone, but I spend 80% of my time in front of a desktop or looking at a desktop monitor. So, my phone goes with me and I can check the weather rather quickly. Apple is there. I have it in a widget, so I can have that up right on the home screen to see, for example, what the temperature changes are. I agree. I think AccWeather has gotten so much better and primarily it's been because of the acquisition of an app. And I don't know if you all had ever used this app called Dark Skies. That was a great app. And it was great for the fact that it had that predictability. You'd get a notification on your phone saying, hey, looks like it's going to rain in 15 minutes. And sure enough, it would rain in 15 minutes. It was a great app. Apple bought it. I mean, sometimes I wish Apple, instead of mucking around, would buy more services, particularly in gaming. And just, they have enough money to be able to do that, buy it, and then build it within their infrastructure. They did that with Dark Skies because there was a dramatic change in what was available on AccWeather. And now AccWeather on the phone or to a degree on your desktop, all of those things, that stuff is so good and the information is really pretty good with it. I'm going to suggest another one that before I got into widgets on my desktop and Apple provided that. There's one called Forecast Bar. It's got weather and radar and it sits up in your menu area. And so you can pull it down and get whatever information you want. And for someone like myself who spends a lot of time on a desktop, that's a great place to have it, is just up in the menu bar if I want to check the weather. It's interesting they say what's new. We removed Dark Sky as a provider because that service is being shut down, because Apple bought it. It's a pretty good desktop client. There are some clients that I've used that have, like, if it's raining, your background screen will have rain going on it and things like that. There are in-app purchases for it, but it's not a killer. You can get updates. So the weather, you'll get an update, every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes. And for how long? For a year, basically. And you see the different pricings on that for month or year for various levels of updates if you want to get them. But yeah, kind of a pretty interface. Pull down, it has all the data that you want. You want more about temperatures, you just click on the temperature window and it pops to the side with more information about temperatures like heat index and such. So it's a pretty cool menu embedded application. And then the other one, which diverges into the weird, is one of my favorites. And it's like one I'm willing to pay for just because it's so funky. And it's apparently pretty accurate. Have any of you used Carrot? I think Peter has. Yep. And Chris has tried it. I put it on, if you want your weather to be really snipey, you can set the messaging to be really nasty or sarcastic. And that adds a different tone to it. But Carrot Weather is, I don't want to show it there.
Is that aimed at millennials, Gary?
I don't know. Those of us in our generation would think it's aimed at millennials. But people kind of like it. And here are the, different ways in which it looks. Sure. Here's one statement. I don't know if you can see it. It also has like an ego of its own. So here's a response. Make the most of the nice weather that I generated for you, or else. And it's 72 in San Francisco in this case, in that window. But it's got all sorts of great stuff, including now a CarPlay app. And I haven't played much with it. It just came out. And it's got different live activities. And the app, which is sort of like an artificial intelligence, refers to us as meat bags. So Winter is in full swing, meatbags. While you're busy hoarding snowballs for the upcoming ice age, I've been hard at work on the big update for your favorite weather app. So it's got a little humor and a little snipe to it. There's a picture of the CarPlay app for those who are watching the video. And then they have different levels of subscriptions that are available. It can have, you can set it's 17 plus, it's age related, infrequent alcohol, tobacco, drug use references. One of the things that you can do with it, and here it is, here's the pricing, $20 a year. Well, if you want the Ultra, you can go up to $40 a year. I don't know what these different levels do, but if you get the app and you put it on and you use the free version, it'll tell you what you get out of the other versions too. The app on the phone in particular will come up and it will have its little icon of an eyeball, and you can poke the eyeball and it reacts. So there's all sorts of fun things to do. One of my favorites here is track down secret locations. Every 24 hours, it will let you know there's another secret location. And what it does is it gives you a statement, like a clue, sort of like where's the rockiest part of the nation? And you get a map and it's touch sensitive. So you touch different parts of the map and you'll get a signal strength, which tells you you're getting warm or you're getting cold. So as the signal strength goes up, then you can stretch the map and you can keep doing it. And finally, when you hit the spot, information comes up about it. It's a historic site, whatever, and things like that. So it's kind of a little daily game that you can play if you want to. That's kind of fun stuff. Also has augmented reality, so you can take the eyeball. I call it an eyeball. It looks more like one of those old Logitech eyeball cameras. And you can drop it into your living room and you can do things with it. It's kind of fun. So, and now I guess they have Carrot AI. You can create a relationship or bond with it. It's a fun app, and so try it. Maybe buy the low end of it and see what it can do. But it's kind of, and it's on all platforms. And I think I have to go back and see, is it on? It's on Apple Vision. So it's on Vision Pro. So you can get it there. So iPad, iPhone, Apple Watch, and Apple Vision. So that's my suggestion. Any comments or reactions or things that other people introduce that you want to talk about?
There's another site for people that really want to dig into weather, and it is a website. It's called Tropical Tidbits. And this includes a number of weather forecasting pages and models. You can literally use it for traveling. And of course, the various models have different degrees of accuracy depending upon where you are in the country, right? So a couple of years back, I was making a trip from Tucson to north of Santa Barbara to my old school for a trustees meeting. And I actually programmed this out, and it said it's going to rain like the dickens the night before you get there. And it's going to rain like all holy you-know-what the day after you leave. And this was 10 days in advance, but it was going to be clear the day I was there. And sure enough, that's exactly how it panned out. And so this takes a little getting used to, but for people that really want to geek out on weather, it's kind of a fun site. And there are lots of different things to look at on here. And some of this is actually where they're doing the actual modeling work. And so you can see different things. And there is a play button on that big US map, and you can see stuff interacting and at various times going forward. So if you're planning stuff like weddings, and you really want to know, is it going to rain on Saturday? This might be a way to find out. And when I say Saturday, I mean Saturday like in 10 to 15 days.
Yeah.
Type thing. So
I will take all these links. Yeah. I'll take all these links and put them within the show notes for the different apps, or at least it will get you connected to the ones that we talked about, and you can check them out as part of the show and in the show notes. So how do you integrate weather into the information in your life? Peter, do you want to start?
Sure. My thoughts about weather most of the time are three things: temperature, precipitation, and sunrise and sunset. Those are the things I'm most interested in. And I've got those built into widgets everywhere I look. So my lock screen, my home screen, different screens I swipe to on my phone, they're all there. I can see them at a glance. On any watch face that I use regularly, I've got a complication that shows the temperature, the high and low. And when I tap on it, I get into the watch weather app. So that's where most of my use in life goes. Occasionally, when the weather's bad and the weather app is alerting me trouble, that's when I get on my iPad or MacBook to take a look at the maps carefully. I want maps to be the bigger, the better. So the biggest screen I can get my hands on. And that's when I go to Weather Underground because I can turn on and off, satellite view. I can put on different kinds of radar. I can show the weather fronts that you normally see on the Weather Channel. I can add that layer to the map. I can look at precipitation and wind and all kinds of things like that. It's very good for predicting what's going to happen. And I can also flip into, I hadn't thought about this till just now, I can flip into a weather cam, nearby weather cams. Most of them are from the Ohio Highway Department, but some are outside of schools and, certain major buildings, and just take a look at what it looks like. If I'm going over to Gary's house, I can look at I-271 and say, what does it look like for the cameras pretty close to your house? And I can see, I don't have to guess just by the numbers. And that's how I build it into my life, is by making it easily glanceable. And if I want to know more, tap on the thing I'm glancing at and dig in.
Chris, ideas for you in terms of how you integrate weather information?
I think Gary laid it out real well, actually, that, sort of for us here in Tucson, for a good part of the year, we get some winter rain, but it's mostly storms that come across the northern Baja. And so those are more like your traditional rain all day kind of things. But in the summertime, we get these monsoons, and these storms have been getting stronger and stronger. And when it's monsoon season, I pull out the big guns, which include an app called Lightning Pro that actually shows me the lightning strikes nearby in pretty close to real time. I mean, it's really quick. And that's a very popular app with the storm chasers. These are photographers who like to photograph lightning. And the big trick, by the way, is to get by the side of the storm. Don't let it come right on top of you, but by the side of the storm, and then you sort of chase it along the side. Although sometimes, depending upon the storm and the roadway, it doesn't cooperate. But these guys have been known to drive all night, like a couple 100 miles, chasing these storms, which is pretty crazy. But for us here in Tucson, the lightning stuff, the radar stuff becomes real important. And we actually lost a large tree in our backyard last summer, and we were having straight line winds that scared the heck out of my wife because she thought the front window was going to go in the living room. And so she went in the bedroom just in time to see a tree that had a canopy over a third of our backyard get gracefully lifted out of the ground and laid down on our wall with neighbors.
Oh.
And this thing was about 40 feet tall, and it was too big to hug at the base. So it just came right out of the ground like a stick. And it was pretty amazing. I could share pictures, but, it brings a different level of involvement at that point when you start thinking safety. And, we officially don't have tornadoes down here in Arizona, but we've had some tornadic activity that has definitely been established. And we lost a whole bunch of trees last summer in a couple of these storms. That one I mentioned took out a whole bunch of trees along, how can I describe it? Well, sort of a neighborhood going southeast from here, which is the storm track. So it's a little different involvement. I have other apps, like I was saying, like a couple of radar apps, and whichever radar you happen to like and the screen you like. Gary nailed it. But there's lots of them out there, various TV stations. FEMA is an app I have that I sometimes will take a look at. It's interesting when you see how they're addressing different disasters and stuff, because they have their own app. And then there's NOAA Radar and a couple of others. And, of course, the TV stations are pretty good. So that's sort of how I integrate it in.
Yeah, I think dark skies used to have that feature for lightning. And that was always fascinating for me. And maybe other apps do, I don't know. And not even sure if the Apple has that. I'm not sure if the Apple app has radar connected to it yet.
I think it does have radar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it does have radar, but I really like the lightning aspect of that with dark skies. You could turn it on and you could see in, Northeast Ohio up here between here and Cleveland, where the lightning strikes going on and the storms that are happening. Gary, do you have anything to add in terms of integrating weather information in your life?
No, except NOAA came up, and I think when I have a sister-in-law in Tampa, and I did use NOAA to kind of track the hurricanes that were coming out of through the Gulf. Just once look around, but mostly the Apple app. And now I'm going back to check out underground radar, and then the new one that Chris told us about, maybe tropical tidbits. Yeah. So I've learned a little bit tonight, which is what always happens with me with these events.
Yeah. I get fascinated during hurricane season about looking at hurricane maps and live weather maps that have hurricanes. Having lived in Ocean City, Maryland, and even more so in Myrtle Beach, and then in Georgia, I got fascinated with hurricanes during the years that I was down there, and tracking them was necessary. And I still find it interesting to look at hurricane situations. I think the most common use that I have for weather apps right now, and it's not Carrot. Carrot is the kind of daily thing I look at for fun and for the weather, and I can get notifications on it. But with the Apple weather app, I use it when I'm traveling, and particularly when I'm traveling by car. Also, when I'm traveling by plane, I'm curious about what the weather is like in the area that I'm going to. But when I'm traveling by car, I will put in connecting cities that I'll be going through. So if I'm going to Illinois, I'll do Dayton, I'll do Indianapolis, I'll do, Terre Haute, I'll do Carbondale. And what it does is I can, especially during winter months, I can get an idea what the predictions are of weather along the way. So, and I can look at it the day before and look at all those cities and look at it the day that I travel to get a sense of, am I going into a storm, or at least as it's coming up. So I will have it set up in the progression of the city travel list that I'm going to go to. And if I go back the same way, then I just shift them around. And I can just flip through the weather for different cities to find out what we might be facing on the road. So that's about as weathery as I get. Otherwise, I'm happy to sit here in my house in Northeast Ohio and just let it happen. Can't control it, haven't changed it yet. I have tried to wish it away, and that hasn't been successful. So you just kind of sit back and let it happen and look outside and enjoy it, even if it's minus 13 degrees. So anything else you'd like to add? The group likes to add.
Yeah, a couple of three quick things. What you said about flipping through the different locations, I think, is a great interface thing of Apple. And I know a lot of people who use that for where their family's located, so that they can look at important other people. There's a similar nice interface on the Apple Watch. There's a rotary display. You tap the weather complication, if that's what you've got, and you see the temperature around a ring for the next 12 hours. Tap it again, precipitation for the next 12 hours. Tap it again, wind for the next 3 hours or 12 hours. I love that. Then it goes to ultraviolet. That doesn't interest me. Visibility also not of interest. But then humidity and dew point, which does interest me as well, and air quality index. So that's a really nice interface. And before I end showering too much love on Apple, I would say the one thing, or the one minor gripe I have about Apple Weather, is the radar maps load kind of slow for me, and especially slow when the weather's really bad. So,
when you want to look at them.
Right, when I'm most interested in finding out quickly how it's moving and then zooming to a bigger or smaller view, and then, watching the timeline of how it's moving again. So,
Okay. I think that's a wrap. Unless there's other comments, we will call this show a nice, I thought when we'd get talking about the weather, I was like, well, okay, we're going to talk about the weather. Much more fascinating for me. You guys really brought it home with some great ideas. So thank you for that. And I'm sure the listeners and viewers appreciate that. Our next live episode will be on the 29th of Wednesday at 9 p.m. through YouTube, where you can watch the crew at youtube.com/@oldmacgang. You can always pick up the podcast or video later if you miss the live show. Please share us with your friends in your Mac user groups if you have the opportunity to connect with a Mac user group. Our music bed is by Philip Gross, Marrakesh, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. More information about this podcast and others can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks to the group Gary, Chris, Peter, and Bob, who's traveling right now and is going to be traveling for the next couple of episodes. He'd normally be here with us as another member. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. See you next time.